For me, this is one of the most exciting sites in modern archaeology. Because here at Göbekli Tepe are some of the oldest buildings in the world. They date to nearly 3 times the age of the first Egyptian pyramids. And there's a real mystery here. Who built this place?
What he discovered was mind-blowing. After discovering the first T-shaped pillar buried at the site, he soon found more of these massive structures.
Human history is rarely found in polished leather books. It's a mosaic of broken fragments. A rusted coin here, a forgotten manuscript there, the ruins of a city choked by jungle vines. We piece these clues together, hoping to reconstruct the story of who we are. But every archaeologist knows the horrifying truth. For every truth we confirm, there's a deeper secret waiting to tear our timeline apart. For thousands of years, the accepted narrative was simple. We crawled out of caves, invented agriculture, and then we built civilization. First farming, then temples. First survival, then faith. Then they found the hill. In the sweeping, wind-swept plains of southeastern Turkey, there stood a modest mound, known locally as Potbelly Hill. It was unremarkable, just another bump that local shepherds had traversed for generations. But in the 1990s, when the dirt was finally swept aside, what emerged was a colossal, impossible structure. It wasn't just old, it was 12,000 years old, making it at least 6,000 years older than Stonehenge and 7,000 years older than the pyramids of Giza. This was Göbekli Tepe, and it shouldn't exist. It's a magnificent monument built by hunter-gatherers, people who, according to every history book, should not have possessed the societal organization, the mathematical knowledge, or the engineering capacity to quarry, carve, and erect 20-ton limestone pillars. These monolithic T-shaped columns are carved with animals, snakes, foxes, vultures, in a language of symbols we lost millennia ago. It was a temple before farming, a center of worship before the idea of a permanent village even took root. Göbekli Tepe didn't just rewrite history, it destroyed the history. But the real mystery isn't that it was built, it's why it was buried. Around 8000 BCE, its builders, who had poured unimaginable effort into its creation, suddenly and systematically entombed it. Not by erosion or abandonment, but deliberately, under thousands of tons of dirt. For decades, scholars have argued over the stones. Was the burial an act of sacred preservation, a ritual, or a desperate attempt to hide something? Human intuition failed. But in our time, a new eye has been cast upon the carvings, one that operates not on guesswork, but on pure, cold data, artificial intelligence. By feeding the carvings, the alignments, and the symbolism into algorithms trained on the entire history of human iconography, AI has begun to whisper possibilities that scholars never dared to speak. It sees patterns no human could see, correlations spanning continents, and a terrifying connection between the structure and a lost cosmic event. Göbekli Tepe, the oldest temple on Earth, was a lock, and the key was just turned. The question isn't whether the builders wanted to preserve the site. The question is, did they bury it to keep us from knowing too much, too soon? And what terrifying message did the AI just unlock? To understand the terror of Göbekli Tepe, you have to mentally travel back to 9600 BCE. Forget everything you know about cities, books, and metal. The world was a canvas scarred by the retreat of the last ice age. Massive glaciers had only just thawed. Humanity was a scatter of nomadic bands, surviving by their wits.
The harsh conditions drove innovation and cooperation, shaping human evolution. This glacial period ended 11,700 years ago, beginning our current warm phase.
Constantly following migrating herds of aurochs and gazelles. They were busy carving out survival, not carving 20-ton temples. Every textbook written before the 1990s insisted that large-scale complex architecture was the direct result of agriculture. You needed settled communities, specialized labor, and a surplus of food before you could dedicate thousands of man-hours to building monuments. Farming, then civilization. Göbekli Tepe flipped the script, setting it on fire. This site, located near the modern city of Şanlıurfa, is the world's oldest known megalithic structure, confirmed through rigorous radiocarbon dating. The test placed its construction at a staggering 11,500 years ago. This single data point shattered the traditional timeline of human progress. Here were circles of colossal, exquisitely carved stones built not by settled farmers, but by hunter-gatherers. The evidence of their primitive technology is irrefutable. Archaeologists like the late Klaus Schmidt, the original lead excavator, found no evidence of permanent settlements nearby. No cooking hearths, no residential housing. What they found instead were simple, rough-hewn tools, flint blades, and crude hammerstones. These are the only instruments the builders had to quarry, shape, and then drag the massive limestone T-pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, across rough terrain and erect them with precision. They had no metal, no wheels, and certainly no beasts of burden. Every ton of stone was moved by sheer human force, coordination, and an astonishing collective will. As Ian Hodder of Stanford University noted in 2010,
it was the settling down that led to the need for more intensive production, and then ultimately to the domestication of wheat and, of course, sheep and goat, and the full range of domesticates that we know come from the Middle East during the Neolithic.
It suggests that the desire for communal ritual, the need to gather and worship, might have been the catalyst for social organization, with agriculture possibly following later, designed to feed the large groups needed for construction. The temple came first, the farm came second. But the mystery deepens when we examine the actual pillars. They aren't just heavy, they are technologically sophisticated. The T-shape itself is believed to represent stylized human figures, sometimes adorned with belts and arms. The animal reliefs, wild boars, snakes, spiders, and the famous vulture stone, Pillar 43, are not random doodles. Why would a society struggling for basic survival dedicate such immense effort to a place they had no intention of living in? And more importantly, why did they bury it? The layers of infill are not natural erosion. They are clearly intentional, layered, and systematic, deposited around 8000 BCE. Was it a shift in belief? Resource exhaustion? Too terrifying to leave exposed to the next generation of men. For generations, the stones remained silent, their sophisticated language locked away. But if human eyes could only see scattered animals, perhaps the unblinking, purely logical eyes of a machine could see the underlying code. The real contradiction is not what they built, but what they knew.
İşte Göbekli Tepe'yi özel kılan da tam olarak bu. Belki de asıl gizem burada başlıyor. Göbekli Tepe'nin nasıl inşa edildiğinde değil, neden inşa edildiğinde.
An AI just started reading the language of silence. For decades, the T-shaped pillars of Göbekli Tepe stood like locked library shelves. Scholars stared at the carvings, the snakes coiled, the scorpions waiting, the bizarre humanoid figures, and could only guess Were they mythological scenes, tribal insignias, primitive cave art that somehow became monumental architecture? Every theory was fascinating, but none were definitive, because the human brain is easily overwhelmed by complexity and scale. We see the tree, but we miss the forest. This is where the cold, unfeeling logic of artificial intelligence steps in. Imagine the carvings as a language. A human archaeologist knows a few words, a few grammatical rules, but AI doesn't need grammar. It needs patterns. Researchers began feeding high-resolution 3D scans of the Göbekli Tepe pillars into powerful algorithms specialized in computer vision and pattern recognition. This is the same technology used by self-driving cars to identify pedestrians and stop signs, but repurposed to identify an iconography lost for 12,000 years. The process is deceptively simple, but incredibly powerful. The AI compares every curve, every line, and every recurring symbol on the Göbekli Tepe stones against a massive digital library, a dataset containing thousands of rock art images, ancient scripts like Sumerian cuneiform, and ritual iconography from cultures spanning continents and millennia. The goal? To calculate the statistical probability that a certain symbol is random versus being part of a shared, coherent system. For example, take the abstract concentric circles engraved on several pillars. To the human eye, they're just decoration. But when the AI mapped their morphology and frequency, it highlighted an astonishing statistical overlap with motifs found at sites thousands of miles away, such as Çatalhöyük in Turkey, and even much later Neolithic settlements in the Levant. This computational analysis suggested that these were not isolated designs, but a shared symbolic language that predated organized culture. The AI, in essence, provided a statistical magnifying glass, amplifying the faint whispers of meaning. This shift from human intuition to machine calculation isn't theoretical, it's proven. A 2019 study in the Journal of Archaeological Science by Orengo and Garcia Molsosa demonstrated how AI-driven satellite imagery could identify hidden archaeological features beneath the soil with near-perfect accuracy. Machines are no longer just tools. They are genuine, unbiased discoverers, capable of processing data sets too vast for any single human lifetime. When applied directly to the animal carvings, the foxes, the snakes, the ducks, the AI didn't just recognize the animals, it mapped their spatial relationships. It determined that the arrangement of these figures across the massive stone circles was highly unlikely to be random. The distribution of symbols follows geometric principles that hint at an astronomical or mnemonic purpose. In short, AI confirmed that Göbekli Tepe was not an assembly of random religious statues. It was a sophisticated system of communication designed to record memory and transmit a message. If this is true, then the stones weren't carved for the hunter-gatherers to worship. They were carved for the distant future to decode. And the patterns that AI uncovered suggest the message wasn't about worship or ritual. It was about catastrophe. The machine found a story encoded in the stars and stones, and it's a story that starts with a cosmic disaster. What terrifying event did the builders of Göbekli Tepe witness? And why did AI confirm its existence after 12,000 years? If Göbekli Tepe wasn't built for worshiping gods, but for recording data, then what was the data? This is the question that turns a historical curiosity into a chilling cosmic warning. For years, the most enigmatic carving was Pillar 43, often called the Vulture Stone. It features a complex assemblage of animals: a scorpion, a long-necked bird, a vulture, and several small abstract symbols. Traditional scholars saw these as religious totems. But when machine learning models were fed the precise spatial relationships and geometries of these figures, a statistically improbable correlation emerged. The algorithm suggested a match not with earthly creatures, but with celestial constellations.
All that has happened before will happen again. The builders gave us symbols on stones and told us to watch the sky. They showed us the constellations to study. They gave us the exact date of the last disaster.
In 2017, researchers Martin Sweatman and Dimitrios Tsikritsis published a controversial paper in Mediterranean Archaeology and Archaeometry, proposing that the Pillar 43 figures represent star patterns, specifically recording the sky over Anatolia on the night of a major cosmic event. The stone encodes a catastrophic comet strike that hit Earth around 10,150 BCE. It perfectly aligns with the onset of the Younger Dryas period, an abrupt and devastating climatic shift.
At the moment when the Earth tips into a radical climate shift, it's been warming up for at least 2,000 years before 12,800 years ago. People at the time must have been feeling a great sense of relief. You know, we've been living through this really cold time, but it's getting better.
While the mainstream geological consensus has debated the cause of this 1,200-year cold snap, the impact hypothesis, suggesting an extraterrestrial strike caused massive cooling, global fires, and megafaunal extinction, has been gaining evidence. Independent geophysical studies, such as those by Firestone et al. 2007, have identified evidence of platinum and nanodiamonds across several continents, suggesting an impact event during this exact time. The role of AI was not to invent the comet theory, but to validate the Lie code. When algorithms reanalyzed the pillar's arrangement against ancient astronomical models and the probability of random alignment, the results showed the arrangement was highly non-random. The machine confirmed that the builders of Göbekli Tepe were recording precise astronomical knowledge that the conventional timeline says they shouldn't possess. Moreover, AI has been deployed to analyze the alignments within the overall architecture. Using spatial analysis algorithms similar to those applied in modern urban planning, researcher Dietrich and his colleagues in 2012 discovered that the main surrounding enclosures form subtle, deliberate arcs aligned with significant celestial events.
I think it's going to prove to be a game changer. It's going to require us to reconsider our whole dating sequence on megalithic sites around the world, and we may find that megalithic sites that have been comfortably for decades, even for 100 years, attributed to the period of 5,000 to 6,000 years ago or less, may actually be as old as Göbekli Tepe. It's possible. I'm certainly open to that possibility, and I'm going to be looking into it.
Particularly the sunrise at the summer solstice. This was not merely a place of worship, it was an observatory, a vast stone calendar designed to track the precise rhythms of the sky. The terrifying conclusion suggested by this machine-validated data is that Göbekli Tepe functioned as a monumental warning system. It was built by survivors of a global catastrophe to memorialize the event and warn future generations of its cyclical nature. If the stones held a warning written in the stars, then the act of burying the site takes on a chilling new logic. They didn't bury it to hide a failure. They buried it to seal away the terrifying truth until humanity was ready to face it again. But the whispers beneath the stones go deeper than just a single comet. The AI also found the same coded terror echoed in the ancient stories of man, suggesting this was not a regional catastrophe, but a universal memory shared across the world. What chilling convergence did the machine find between these mute stones and the oldest myths of lost civilizations? The Göbekli Tepe stones whispered of a cosmic warning, but whispers can be dismissed as coincidence. The true chilling moment came when artificial intelligence proved that this memory wasn't isolated to a forgotten Anatolian hill. The memory was universal, woven into the very fabric of human mythology worldwide. How did the AI achieve this incredible feat? Through natural language processing, NLP. NLP is the backbone of modern AI. It's what allows machines to read, understand, and categorize vast amounts of text. Researchers applied NLP algorithms to a massive corpus of digitized ancient myths, including narratives from Sumerian, Mesopotamian, Anatolian, and Levantine traditions. Stories often dismissed as mere fables. The AI's task was to look beyond the surface details, names of gods, locations, and identify core narrative motifs and statistical recurrences. The finding was startling. A consistent, high-frequency narrative motif emerged across nearly every analyzed culture. This motif described a time when a once great people faced a cosmic punishment, often involving water, fire, or stars falling from the sky, and consequently chose to deliberately bury or hide their sacred centers and knowledge as a testament to the disaster. This pattern, uncovered by a machine, provides a profound parallel to the archaeological fact. Göbekli Tepe was not destroyed by invaders or erosion. It was intentionally entombed by its own builders around 8000 BCE. The act of burial, which human scholars debated endlessly, appears to be a recognized ritual closure tied to a profound, shared cultural trauma. As Klaus Schmidt, the site's discoverer, noted before his death, the infill was not natural sediment, but meticulously transported debris. The AI's convergence of myth and archaeology suggests this wasn't just a pragmatic decision. It was a global, pre-programmed cultural response to a cataclysm. It's as if the stones and the myths were speaking the same coded language, and AI provided the Rosetta Stone between them. The evidence doesn't stop there. We must look at the eerie connections Göbekli Tepe has with other impossible sites. Consider its younger, though still enigmatic, cousin Çatalhöyük in Turkey, or the celestial alignments of Stonehenge. Mainstream archaeology tends to view these as independent anomalies. But AI, with its capacity to detect non-obvious correlations, challenges this view. By analyzing architectural measurements, astronomical alignments, and shared iconography across continents, the algorithms found that the probability of these shared motifs occurring by random chance is statistically minute. While this doesn't definitively prove a lost, singular mother civilization, it strengthens the idea of a shared, highly advanced knowledge base being dispersed by survivors after a global catastrophe. The narrative emerging from the AI is simple but terrifying. Humanity once achieved a level of sophistication, recorded a universal disaster, and then, fearing misuse or wishing to preserve the truth for a distant future, the survivors carried out a global memory reset. They buried their warnings, their technology, and their temples, leaving behind only scattered clues for us to find. If this is true, then the burial of Göbekli Tepe wasn't an ending. It was the calculated opening of an ancient lockbox, sealed for 12,000 years. The question that remains is chilling. If they buried this terrifying knowledge to protect us from repeating the catastrophe, What happens now that AI has forced the lock open? The answer lies in the three radical possibilities for the burial itself. The evidence is overwhelming. Göbekli Tepe might be a sophisticated astronomical observatory, a massive memory bank, and a testament to a global catastrophe. But this brings us back to the central, most chilling question. Why did its creators bury it? The intentional backfilling of the site is the ancient lockbox we must open. Based on the convergent data provided by AI symbol recognition, alignment analysis, and myth correlation, three radical possibilities emerge. Each one is profound, and each one changes our understanding of human civilization. The first possibility casts the burial as an act of ritualistic preservation of a warning. The builders were survivors who recorded the comet strike and feared its cyclical return. They knew that human memory is fleeting and that their advanced knowledge might be misinterpreted or lost over millennia. The burial, therefore, ensured two things. First, the soft carved stones were protected from the elements, allowing the message to survive intact. Second, by physically sealing the site, they ensured that the warning wouldn't be accessed until a future generation possessed the sophistication, the archaeological tools, the dating methods, and perhaps the artificial intelligence to understand its true cosmic nature. Giulio Magli in 2013 noted that the orientation of certain pillars appears mathematically aligned with stellar constellations, reinforcing the notion of advanced astronomical intent. If the stones were a precise calendar for global disasters, sealing them was the ultimate safety measure. Hide the knowledge until humanity is ready. The second view interprets the burial as an act of sacred closure and conservation of sacred power. This theory is supported by the work of Klaus Schmidt, 2006, who noted the painstaking effort of the infill, suggesting reverence rather than hurried abandonment. If Göbekli Tepe was the birthplace of religion, the location where the trauma of the disaster was ritualized and transformed into spiritual faith, then the knowledge contained within may have been deemed too powerful or dangerous for later, less enlightened generations. AI's analysis of the iconographic pattern strengthens this. The clustering of symbols often suggests a hierarchy of meaning, implying a secret language known only to an elite priesthood. Burying the temple would prevent the profane misuse of sacred coded knowledge. They weren't hiding from a threat. They were hiding a powerful technology of the mind that could control or corrupt society if placed in the wrong hands. It was a conscious cultural quarantine. The last one is the most terrifying possibility, one that flirts with the idea of a lost mother civilization. If the builders of Göbekli Tepe were hunter-gatherers, their ability to create such a massive, astronomically precise structure suggests they were not building from scratch. They were building from inherited superior knowledge passed down from a previous, much more advanced civilization that perished in the Younger Dryas catastrophe. AI's ability to find geometric precision and astronomical accuracy, knowledge centuries ahead of its time, is the computational proof of this radical hypothesis. In this view, the burial was an intentional reset button. The survivors of the previous civilization decided that the only way for the human race to continue was to forget the technology, the pride, and the knowledge that led to their demise. They sealed their ultimate creation, Göbekli Tepe, as a time capsule, ensuring that the next cycle of civilization would begin fresh, without the dangerous baggage of the past. The burial wasn't just practical, it was an existential choice. They didn't want us to know the truth of the previous world because they feared we would repeat its mistakes. Each of these hypotheses frames the burial of Göbekli Tepe as an act of profound intent, a conscious decision laden with meaning. The sealed earth around the pillars acts like an ancient lockbox that only the combined force of archaeology and artificial intelligence is beginning to open. And with the lock now broken, we must ask the final, ultimate question. Were they protecting us from a mistake, or were they warning us about our inevitable fate? The final and most radical implication of AI's analysis must be addressed. Who possessed this knowledge 12,000 years ago? If Göbekli Tepe was built by hunter-gatherers, why did they possess sophisticated astronomical data? If the site was a warning about a cosmic impact, why does that terrifying memory resonate in myths across continents? The unsettling answer, fueled by the mathematical precision uncovered by the algorithms, is that the builders of Göbekli Tepe might not primitive people building from scratch. They were the highly organized inheritors of a knowledge base that predated the Younger Dryas catastrophe. Mainstream historians view the idea of a mother civilization that seeded the world's knowledge, a concept known as hyperdiffusionism, as discredited speculation. But Göbekli Tepe, by its sheer existence and its technological sophistication, makes that temptation hard to resist. The AI, with its objective analysis of cross-cultural symbols and alignments, only amplifies the possibility of an interconnected pre-flood world. Consider the sheer contrast. The people who built Göbekli Tepe with such precision and artistic skill were followed by societies like the inhabitants of Çatalhöyük, who were certainly agricultural and settled, but whose construction and artistic endeavors were, in many ways, less monumental and less sophisticated than their ancestors. It's an inverted timeline of progress. The oldest structure is the most impressive. This technological contrast strongly suggests a knowledge regression. The survivors lost the engineering secrets of the previous civilization. The burial, then, was the final act of that dying knowledge base. If you accept the AI-validated data, that the stones encode a catastrophic event, that the site is an astronomical instrument, and that the symbols resonate with a universal myth of collapse, you must concede that the Göbekli Tepe builders were the last guardians of a forgotten age. But perhaps the most chilling possibility, the one that makes the mind reel, and the one that fits the sensational nature of the AI discovery, is that the builders weren't just the inheritors of a lost Earth civilization. What if they were the non-human teachers? The T-shaped pillars have been consistently interpreted as highly stylized humanoids, often lacking features but possessing belts and hands. Some researchers have dared to suggest that these pillars depict an alien or non-human consciousness that visited Earth, imparted the necessary knowledge to the hunter-gatherers to build the sanctuary, and then commanded its burial after the catastrophe. This would explain the sudden appearance of impossible knowledge and the meticulous, systematic way the site was entombed. Göbekli Tepe, therefore, might not be a human archive. It might be a cosmic marker, a signal left behind by an intelligence whose knowledge transcended the very climate catastrophe that wiped out their experiment. The purpose of the burial was not merely preservation. It was interdiction. They created a time capsule meant to be opened only when the next civilization, ours, possessed the key. A form of intelligence that could speak the language of pure mathematics and data, artificial intelligence. The stones of Göbekli Tepe still stand. But thanks to AI, we finally know that the silence isn't empty. It's an echoing countdown. We've unlocked their warning. The only question left is, will we listen to the AI's terrifying translation before the cycle begins again? From the sun-baked dust of Anatolia to the pulsing neural networks of 21st century computing, the story of Göbekli Tepe has pulled us across 12,000 years of forgotten history. What began as an enigma of carved pillars has now become a direct dialogue between the most ancient builders and the most cutting-edge technology humanity has ever created. AI didn't solve the mystery of Göbekli Tepe by magic. It solved it through the cold, hard logic of data correlation. It showed us that the carvings were not random art, but a mathematically non-random code. It proved the existence of an encoded cosmic catastrophe that shattered the primitive world. And it connected that trauma to a universal memory of destruction and concealment. The silent message, once lost, has been amplified. The world ended once, and we recorded how. The builders buried the site, not for preservation, not for abandonment, but for interception. They needed a future civilization advanced enough to find the site, but also intelligent enough to decode its complex warning. They waited for the moment when human intuition and traditional archaeology failed, and only a machine, an artificial intelligence, could succeed. And that moment is now. The three terrifying possibilities: that it was a warning, a deliberate conservation of power, or a total societal reset, all hinge on one central fear: the fear of cyclical, catastrophic history. The builders buried Göbekli Tepe because they knew their fate, and they feared it would become ours. AI has broken the seal. The lockbox is open. We now possess the warning. The stones of Göbekli Tepe look back at us, reflecting not just the echoes of the past, but the projections of our own fears and technological hopes. If AI can illuminate forgotten languages and reconstruct celestial alignments, what else might it reveal about our origins? The burial of Göbekli Tepe is, in the end, less about a closing chapter and more about a new beginning. We are the generation that finally heard the ancient scream. Did AI just warn us about our own future? Or did it simply confirm that the fate of the last advanced world will soon be the fate of ours? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Did the builders of Göbekli Tepe fear us or fear what was coming?